Excited that you have a show because you're fresh, you're funny, you're great. And I want you to know something. From my heart, I never liked you.
They're saying it to keep the energy up, and it's exciting.
No, you're the energy. You don't have to keep it up. You're the energy. You come out with the X-ray.
America's most beloved insult comedian, Don Rickles, had a secret list of people he genuinely despised. Not just for laughs, not just for his act, but people he truly hated from the bottom of his heart. And there was one person on that list who made his blood boil more than anyone else. Someone who represented everything wrong with Hollywood in his eyes. Stay with me, because this story will change how you see one of comedy's greatest legends forever. Don Rickles was known as Mr. Warmth, but that nickname was totally sarcastic. On stage, he was anything but warm. He would tear apart celebrities, politicians, and audience members with such brutal honesty that it left people gasping. But here's the thing that most people never knew. Behind all those jokes and roasts, there were real feelings of anger and disgust. Rickles didn't just pretend to dislike these people for entertainment. He actually couldn't stand some of them in real life. For over 60 years, Rickles kept his mouth shut about his true feelings. He turned his real hatred into comedy gold, making millions laugh while hiding his genuine contempt. But in his final years, when he had nothing left to lose, the truth finally came out. And the person at the top of his hate list might surprise you. Let me take you back to the beginning. Don Rickles grew up in a time when comedy was safe and polite. Comedians told clean jokes that never offended anyone. They were like friendly uncles who just wanted to make you smile. But Rickles saw through all of that fake niceness. He thought it was boring and dishonest. He believed that real comedy should cut deep and reveal the truth, even if it hurt. When Rickles started performing in the 1950s, Las Vegas was becoming the entertainment capital of America. This was a wild place where anything could happen. The mob controlled the casinos, and celebrities came to party and gamble, steal away their fortunes. In this crazy world, Rickles found his calling. He realized he could say things that other comedians were too scared to say. He could point out the phoniness and hypocrisy that everyone else ignored. But there was always a fine line between making a joke and making an enemy. In Las Vegas during those days, saying the wrong thing about the wrong person could end your career, or worse. Rickles learned to walk that tightrope perfectly. He would insult the most powerful people in entertainment, but he did it with such skill that they would laugh along and applaud him for it. The genius of Don Rickles was that he could tell someone exactly what he thought about them, but disguise it as a joke. The audience would roar with laughter, thinking it was all just fun and games. But Rickles knew the difference between his staged insults and his real feelings. And trust me, there were some celebrities who he genuinely could not stand. Now you might be wondering who could possibly be at the top of this list. Was it Frank Sinatra? The mob-connected singer who could make or break careers with a single phone call? Was it Ronald Reagan, the failed actor who somehow became president? Maybe it was Dean Martin, the drunk who coasted on his good looks and charm. All of these people annoyed Rickles for different reasons, but there was one person who represented everything he hated about Hollywood. That person was Bob Hope. I know what you're thinking. Bob Hope, the beloved entertainer who made movies for decades and entertained troops during wartime. The guy who seemed like everyone's favorite grandfather. How could anyone hate Bob Hope? Well, let me explain why Don Rickles saw Bob Hope as the absolute worst example of what was wrong with American entertainment. To understand Rickles' hatred for Bob Hope, you need to understand what Rickles believed comedy should be. In his mind, comedy was supposed to be dangerous. It was supposed to make people uncomfortable. It was supposed to reveal truths that nobody wanted to talk about. Great comedians, in Rickles' view, were like surgeons who cut away the lies and pretense to show what was really underneath. Bob Hope represented the complete opposite of this philosophy. Hope was safe. Hope was predictable. Hope never said anything that might offend anyone or make them think too hard. His jokes were like cotton candy, sweet and harmless, but with no real substance. To Rickles, this wasn't comedy at all. It was just empty entertainment designed to make people feel good without challenging them in any way. Rickles once said that Bob Hope was so boring that he could fall asleep before Hope even walked on stage. But it went deeper than just finding Hope's act dull. Rickles saw Hope as a fraud who had fooled America into thinking he was funny. Hope had built a career on playing it safe, never taking any real risks or saying anything that might hurt his image. In Rickles' eyes, this was the coward's way to fame. What really got under Rickles' skin was how successful Hope became by being so fake. Hope made millions of dollars and became one of the most famous entertainers in America by telling jokes that wouldn't offend a church congregation. Meanwhile, comedians who were willing to take risks and tell hard truths struggled to make a living. It seemed completely backwards to Rickles. The entertainment industry was rewarding dishonesty and punishing honesty. During his live shows, Rickles would absolutely destroy Bob Hope whenever he got the chance. He would say things like, "Bob Hope is so clean that if he went to heaven, even the angels would fall asleep from boredom." Or he would joke that Hope never offended anyone because he never made anyone really laugh either. The audience would crack up, but Rickles meant every word. The thing that made Rickles' hatred even more intense was that he recognized Hope's intelligence. Hope wasn't stupid. He was actually very smart about managing his career and staying popular for decades. But in Rickles' mind, Hope was using his intelligence for all the wrong reasons. Instead of pushing boundaries and creating real art, Hope was just manufacturing a product designed to sell as widely as possible. Rickles compared Bob Hope to Disneyland once, saying that Hope's comedy was beautiful and shiny on the surface, but there was no truth underneath it. Everything was fake and sanitized. There was no real emotion, no real insight into human nature, no real connection between the performer and the audience. It was all just a carefully constructed illusion designed to separate people from their money. But Rickles' problems with Hope went beyond just artistic differences. He also saw Hope as a symbol of everything that was wrong with Hollywood's power structure. Hope had connections with the right people and knew how to play the political game. He never rocked the boat or challenged the system. He just went along with whatever would keep him successful and popular. In contrast, Rickles was always the outsider. He didn't have the right connections or the political skills to play the Hollywood game. He succeeded purely on talent and the willingness to say what others wouldn't say. But he watched as people like Hope, who he considered far less talented, achieved much greater mainstream success simply because they were willing to be fake. This created a deep bitterness in Rickles that lasted his entire career. Every time he saw Bob Hope on television or heard about Hope's latest project, it reminded him of how unfair the entertainment business could be. Talent didn't always win. Sometimes being fake and safe was actually better for your career than being real and dangerous. The irony wasn't lost on Rickles that Hope was often called a great American entertainer and patriot because of his work entertaining troops. Rickles respected the military and understood the value of bringing laughter to soldiers in difficult situations. But he thought it was hypocritical for Hope to get so much credit for this when Hope's actual comedy was so weak and artificial. What made the situation then more frustrating for Rickles was that he could never really express these feelings publicly. If he had gone on television and seriously criticized Bob Hope, it would have backfired terribly. The public loved Hope and saw him as a sweet, harmless entertainer. Rickles would have looked like a bitter, jealous comedian attacking America's grandfather. So instead, he had to turn his genuine hatred into comedy material, making jokes about Hope while pretending it was all just part of his act. This is why Rickles' blacklist remained secret for so long. He knew that revealing his true feelings would be career suicide. The public wanted to believe that all the insults were just jokes, that everybody was really friends behind the scenes. They didn't want to hear that sometimes the comedy came from a place of real disgust and disappointment. But as Rickles got older and his career wound down, he began to feel differently about keeping these secrets. He had spent his whole life turning his honest feelings into entertainment for other people. He had made millions laugh by expressing his frustrations in a socially acceptable way. But part of him felt like he had never been able to be completely honest about what he really thought. In his final years, Rickles started to open up more about his true feelings. He wasn't worried about his career anymore, and he didn't care if people were offended by his honesty. He wanted to set the record straight about who he really was and what he really believed. And when it came to Bob Hope, there was no pretending anymore that it had all been just jokes. Rickles revealed that Hope represented everything he had fought against his entire career. The fake smiles, the calculated niceness, the complete lack of genuine emotion or insight. Hope had turned comedy into a business transaction instead of an art form. He had shown that you could become incredibly successful in entertainment without ever saying anything real or taking any meaningful risks. But here's what makes this story even more interesting. Rickles wasn't wrong about Bob Hope, but he also wasn't completely right either. Hope may have been safe and calculated, but he also brought joy to millions of people over many decades. His style of comedy might not have been cutting-edge or revolutionary, but it served a purpose. Sometimes people need entertainment that doesn't challenge them or make them uncomfortable. Sometimes they just want to laugh and forget their problems for a while. The tragedy of Rickles' hatred for Hope is that it revealed his own insecurities about his place in the entertainment world. Rickles was incredibly talented and influential, but he never achieved the mainstream success that Hope enjoyed. He was always seen as an edgy, niche performer, rather than a beloved family entertainer. Part of his anger toward Hope came from jealousy, even though he would never admit it. At the same time, Rickles' criticism of Hope contained important truths about the entertainment industry. There is something troubling about a system that rewards blandness over boldness, safety over honesty. Rickles spent his career fighting against this tendency, even when it hurt his own chances for mainstream success. His hatred for Bob Hope was really hatred for a system that he felt undervalued real artistry. The relationship between Rickles and Hope also shows us something important about comedy itself. Comedy can come from many different places. It can come from joy and celebration, like Bob Hope's style. Or it can come from anger and frustration, like Don Rickles' approach. Both have value, but they serve different purposes and appeal to different audiences. What made Don Rickles special wasn't just his willingness to insult people. It was his ability to channel genuine emotions into his performances. When he roasted someone on stage, the audience could feel that there was something real behind it. It wasn't just a scripted joke or a calculated put-down. It was coming from a place of authentic feeling, even if that feeling was sometimes anger or contempt. This authenticity is what separated Rickles from other insult comedians who tried to copy his style. They could learn his techniques and delivery, but they couldn't fake the genuine emotions that powered his best performances. Rickles' hatred for people like Bob Hope actually made him a better comedian because it gave him something real to work with. But living with that much anger and bitterness also took its toll on Rickles. Friends who knew him well said that he could be a very different person off stage than he was on stage. Away from the spotlight, he was often gentle and kind, especially with his family. But the professional frustrations he felt about the entertainment industry never completely went away. The fact that Rickles kept his blacklist secret for so long shows how much he understood about the difference between his public persona and his private feelings. He knew that his fans wanted to see him as someone who insulted people, but didn't really mean it. They wanted to believe that it was all just an act, that everyone was really friends behind the scenes. Revealing the truth about his genuine hatred for certain celebrities would have shattered that illusion. When Rickles finally did start talking more openly about his true feelings in his later years, it created a complex picture of who he really was. On one hand, he was the master of insult comedy who could make anyone laugh. On the other hand, he was a deeply critical person who had strong opinions about what was wrong with American entertainment. Both sides were real, and both contributed to his success as a performer. The story of Don Rickles' hatred for Bob Hope is really the story of an artist struggling with compromise. Rickles wanted to change comedy and make it more honest and challenging, but he also needed to make a living and build a successful career. He found a way to express his authentic feelings while still entertaining audiences, but it required him to hide the full truth about what he really thought. In many ways, Rickles' career was a long con game. He spent decades making audiences think they were just watching harmless insult comedy, when they were actually witnessing genuine expressions of anger and frustration about the entertainment industry. The jokes were real, but so were the emotions behind them. People laughed at Rickles' roasts of Bob Hope without realizing they were seeing one artist's sincere criticism of another. This raises interesting questions about the nature of entertainment itself. Is it okay for performers to hide their true feelings from audiences? Should comedy always be honest about its motivations? Rickles found a way to be both entertaining and authentic, but it required a level of deception that bothered him more as he got older. The revelation of Rickles' blacklist in his final years was his way of finally being completely honest with his audience. He wanted people to understand that his career had been built on more than just jokes. It had been built on genuine observations about what was wrong with American culture and entertainment. His hatred for people like Bob Hope was really love for what comedy could be if it were braver and more honest. Looking back at Rickles' career now, we can see how ahead of his time he was in many ways. His criticism of fake, sanitized entertainment feels very relevant in today's media landscape. His insistence that comedy should be dangerous and challenging has influenced generations of comedians who came after him. Even his anger and bitterness served an important artistic purpose. But we can also see the personal cost of living with so much professional frustration. Rickles spent his entire career fighting against trends in entertainment that he couldn't really change. He made his mark and influenced many people, but he never completely won the war against blandness and fake niceness that bothered him so much. The entertainment industry continued to reward safety over boldness, just as it does today. The tragedy and triumph of Don Rickles is that he found a way to make his anger productive. Instead of just complaining about what was wrong with entertainment, he created something better. His comedy showed what was possible when a performer was willing to take real risks and express genuine emotions. Even though he hated people like Bob Hope, his hatred ultimately made American comedy richer and more diverse. In the end, Don Rickles' secret blacklist tells us as much about him as it does about the people he couldn't stand. It shows us an artist who cared deeply about his craft and was willing to fight for what he believed in, even when it made his life more difficult. It shows us someone who understood the difference between entertainment and art, and who spent his career trying to elevate comedy from mere entertainment to something more meaningful and lasting. The person Don Rickles truly hated most wasn't really Bob Hope the individual. It was what Bob Hope represented. An entertainment industry that valued safety over honesty, blandness over boldness, and commercial success over artistic integrity. Rickles spent his entire career fighting against these values, and in doing so, he created a body of work that will be remembered long after both he and Hope are forgotten. That's the real legacy of Don Rickles. Not just the jokes and the insults, but the passionate belief that entertainment should mean something more than just making people comfortable. His hatred, as negative as it might seem, actually came from a place of love for what comedy could be at its best. And that love, disguised as anger and wrapped up in laughter, changed American entertainment forever. If this story surprised you and made you think differently about one of comedy's greatest legends, then please hit that like button and share this video with your friends. There are so many more untold stories about the real feelings and hidden conflicts behind Hollywood's biggest stars. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another shocking revelation about the entertainment world. Trust me, there are plenty more secrets where this came from, and some of them will absolutely blow your mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.